Thanks for joining me on UpFront. You lost your 27-year-old son, Humayun, killed in Iraq, protecting his fellow soldiers from a car bomb. You have since accused Donald Trump of dividing Americans, of demonizing Muslims, while, quote, sacrificing nothing and no one. Trump says you're wrong, you have no right to comment, and that he has made sacrifices similar to yours. What do you say to him?
I say what I said to him earlier. He is so unaware. I have, under the Constitution of this country, I have the same rights to criticize him as he has the rights to criticize others. He forgets that part. That is the tragedy in his candidacy, that he is totally unaware of the equal rights that this country, this Constitution grants.
Are you surprised, astonished at how big a part of this presidential election campaign you and your wife have become? You're a Muslim immigrant from Pakistan. Did you ever imagine that you would take to the Democratic convention stage and not only be given an opportunity to speak, but speak in such a way that you are dominating news headlines both nationally and globally a week later?
We are private citizens. We love our privacy, peace and quiet with family and children. I was not expecting that. But I tell you this, on streets, any place that I go, people come to say thank you what you have said. They give me hug. Not only hug, when I look into their eyes, I see glimmer of hope and tears in their eyes. There had not been a person who has met me had not had tears in their eyes. And the reason is not the speech or the person or the Khizr or that, not at all. The despair that this candidate has created among minorities, especially Muslims, that had been repudiated. He does not have any moral. Today, President Obama, first time in the history of this country, he said this candidate is unfit to be the president of the United States.
So you have no regrets about what you've done since the speech. Trump said on Monday that what bothered you, he said, is that he wants to stop so-called Islamic terrorists from coming into the US, whereas you, he thinks, don't. One of his close advisors has called you an agent of the Muslim Brotherhood. Were you expecting this line of very personal attack on you when you decided to speak out against him?
These are demagogues. These lines, these words are pandering for vote. These are fear-mongering terms and words because they have nothing better to offer except fear-mongering. And luckily, there is enough time. Folks are figuring it out that that is not the case. I am against violence as any decent American or citizen of this world would be.
You have suggested that the United States is the greatest country in history, and yet up to 45% of the American people still say they're going to vote for Donald Trump in November to be their commander-in-chief, regardless of how bigoted or racist he is, how crassly or crudely he behaves. Those are your fellow Americans. That must shock you.
It certainly does. But in history, if you know when countries make mistakes, fear-mongering, demagoguing, pandering for vote, countries, nations have made mistakes. History is full of those mistakes. And I am certain that American citizens are not going to buy the snake oil that he is selling.
Your son Humayun's grave has become a shrine at Arlington Cemetery in recent days. People leaving flowers, cards, well-wishers turning up. How do you feel, not just when you see that scene, but when you hear politicians from across the political spectrum, from Hillary Clinton to Senator John McCain, saying your son represented the best of America?
I am encouraged. I am delighted that they are recognizing. But we had known that all along, that he was the best. He received his education here. Army trained him. But inside there was a son of an immigrant Muslim family, decent human being, deliberate human being, caring human being, and rest is evident. Everyone is acknowledging his qualities.
And if your son Humayun, who died a hero aged 27 in Iraq in 2004, protecting his fellow soldiers, if he was alive today, what do you think he'd be saying to you?
He'll be standing right here with his hand on my shoulder.
Supporting your mission?
Every which way.
Some Muslims, they worry that in the current climate, there are brave soldiers or police officers, members of the armed forces who are Muslims, and they're very proud of them. But they also worry that there are other Muslims who aren't part of the armed forces, who aren't interested in joining the military, don't support American wars abroad. And they worry that in the current discourse, there's this division into good Muslims who support American defense, security, wars, and bad Muslims who don't. Bill Clinton said at the convention last week, if Muslims hate terror, then they should stay in America. That's not a helpful attitude, is it?
Yeah, but what is missing in this discourse is that we Muslims in the United States have not prepared ourselves adequately to participate in the discourse. There is lots of misconceptions. Education has little to do with that, meaning that these are educated people, these are political leaders. They really have not been groomed properly to understand Muslims, understand Islam in United States. That's our responsibility. Even if we start today, it will not be too long.
But you would accept that a young American Muslim man who doesn't join the American military, who thinks the American military does bad things abroad, for example, is still as patriotic and is still as part of America as anyone else?
Of course, of course. That is where the outreach has to be conducted. That is why I speak, because Donald Trump touts excluding people. That is not patriotic solution. Not everybody has to wear uniform to be called patriot.
You said in a recent interview on MSNBC that US wars in the Middle East have not been, quote, in the interest of the United States and have created chaos and a quagmire. Your son obviously died tragically while serving in Iraq, very controversial war. Do you think, personally, the Iraq war was a mistake, that it was wrong, as many people do?
I will cite General Colin Powell at Harvard in one of the symposium. The very first words that came out of General Colin Powell's mouth was, "I am sorry, I apologize." And that says it all, that was a mistake that has not served American interest well, and the results are there. There are better ways to handle the difficulties and the disputes and the foreign policies, but that definitely has proven to be a mistake.
Back in 2003, you didn't support going into Iraq?
Not at all.
And what about Hillary Clinton, whose convention you spoke at? A lot of Muslims in the US and around the world have a lot of concerns, fears, worries about her candidacy and what her presidency might look like. They say that she's been very harmful to Muslims in many ways. They point to the Iraq War, which she supported and voted for, Libya, which is now a kind of mess, a disaster. They point to her support for Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu's very right-wing leadership of Israel. Those are legitimate criticisms of her, aren't they? You understand those concerns. You must hear them from your fellow American Muslims.
Of course. She supported, but it was the Republican Party's starting and doing of the Iraq War. As a strong leader of this country, Hillary Clinton has much more balanced policies than the Donald Trump of Republican Party. Any day I will support Hillary Clinton. If I criticize Hillary Clinton on her policies, it is received well. The person who criticizes is not condemned. On the other hand, there is a person that has no empathy at all, no hope.
I interviewed General Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA, on this show, and sitting where you're sitting, he said that he believes that Donald Trump is basically acting as a recruiting sergeant for groups like ISIL. His rhetoric actually helps boost these extremist groups who Trump supporters have tried to link you to. Do you share that view?
I share that view. I add to that is that Donald Trump is incapable of understanding that consequence. He is incapable, intellectually and mentally, his behavior had been proof of that. And these are senior policy makers that are alarming us that this is the danger that is headed this way.
In the specific case of ISIL as well.
Exactly.
One final question. In a typically shameless and offensive statement, ISIL this week called your late son an apostate. As not just a proud American, but a proud Muslim, what is your message to ISIL, to the so-called Islamic State?
That is perverted version of Islam. Islam has nothing to do with this kind of violence. Who are the most victim of their acts? Muslims. As there is ignorance prevalent in this country, so is in other parts of the world. I cannot eradicate ignorance. I cannot change people's thinking and minds and all. We live in a civilized world. We conduct ourselves in a civilized manner, and we will continue to do that.
Khizr Khan, thank you for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you.